One thing SCT is good at, and I've seen it go the other way, is customer service. I think it kind of ties back into our thread mills and our pour tools, is that we're willing to help and that we actually are there to answer the phone. Is that you'd be surprised if you have a question about, what's a 3/8 20, like what pour tool is that, or what is that? What's SAE orb, like you'd be surprised that like calling any of these other tools, maybe even competitors, you might not be able to talk to anybody. You might get put on hold and transferred and having a guy ask another guy, a lot of games of telephone. SCT, you can just call up, probably be me or Sarah answering, and we'll help you right away. With thread mills, ports, as far as custom tooling, I've seen that we're really designing tools a lot off of customers' prints, which isn't super common in the industry. It's not very common that a company will go to that extent to design it. It's more of a small business thing. I think as you see a lot of these larger scaled, they kind of, hey, we have so much business, like we don't want to waste time on like looking at a print and having to reverse engineer design.
Yeah, I see, where they're not going off of part prints. They're saying spec the tool and then I'll make it for you.
Yeah, and so that's something that I think will kind of go that extra step, and it does leave like a good taste in a customer's mouth of, wow, like they can really solve problems. That's another thing that I think SCT just does really well, is that we're willing, if we have the time and we have the bandwidth, that we will, really solve a lot of problems that other companies like won't take the time to look at. That's why I think we get a lot of customers kind of designing the tool on their own and sending it to us, is because that's pretty much what it's to expect in the industry. Is you're not always going to see like, can you figure out a solution for this? Most of the time is going to be like, I don't know what you're looking for. Check our catalog, or, So with that, I think that we're really like,
I'd so much rather design a tool to a print than like have a customer give me some specs and their best guess.
So much
at
more
it.
fun. It's
more
fun
yeah. too, but I have a greater confidence that the tool is actually going to be what's needed when I've been able to see the print and figure out what.
I think another thing that makes us productive is that we really know what tools and what side of the market we sit in. We know where SCT sits in the market, and we don't. Like, we might dabble here or there, but as far as quoting, getting jobs, specials, we don't really waste a lot of time quoting tools and things that we're not capable of doing, or we're capable of actually doing so much.
Right.
But we stick with what we know, and we don't, and this is a good thing. We're not trying to make as a carbide recliner because a customer wants it. Like we're not at the thing of, if a customer asked us, we got to jump at every opportunity.
We got to figure out how to make this, because
not how
this
business
is money
works.
That's there for the taking. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a lot of times, if you don't know what you're doing,
don't go too far out of your lane.
Yeah. We know how to stay in our lane, and we know how to expand our lane.
I've seen us get out of our comfort zone sometimes. And just go, okay, this is new. Right. This is something we've never done before. Let's do it. We can do this.
No, we're up for a challenge, but then you have to know where the difference between being up for a challenge and just completely
getting in over your head,
or doing something that where you have a high chance of not giving your customer what they deserve to get.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it. So it's like I think we stay in our lane, and what we really do is expand our lane. And because we just get better at certain things, it's like we started drills, and now I think we start to expand maybe we can start pushing on this more.
I see it where now we're more comfortable quoting on custom stuff in that area too.
Right. But I guess the best way to put it is that we are, if you say a port tool, thread mill, single point tools, we become like the experts on those, and then expand on top of that, rather than trying to, do a little bit of everything. Let's make an end mill here. Let's make a shell mill. I don't know. Let's try that. Like, instead of just trying a bunch of things to where, your catalog has 100 different categories of things. So I think that's one thing that I really make it. It makes processes and quoting and understanding what to improve upon, and I think even just the process of having wheel packs and kind of making an organized shop, it kind of becomes more lean manufacturing that way, by having more order by keeping in that and then expanding the lane from there. And that's something that I've seen go the opposite way. So it's like nice to come into something that's like, oh, a lot of this is established. Like these operators really know what they're doing. When it comes to profiles, you could talk to this guy and he knows exactly, pops in his head exactly what he's going to do, how he's going to program it, what operations he's going to use, because he's come across that, and we become experts at making tools that other tool manufacturers would have quite a tough time giving the customer what they're looking for.
What areas of improvement? I know you've done some stuff, like some process improvements where you've made things that were kind of not written or not structured as much. You've structured them more so that we can improve the process, make sure that things get out the way they're supposed to get out, and we find problems before they become big problems. But what in particular do you have that you've had experience previously that maybe we don't do or we could do better?
I think one thing is actually something that you did a process improvement on is the quoting calculator. So it ties into tracking what our cost is, because I don't think we know how much any tool costs. We can take a WAG, as you've called it before, but we can't take any tool and say this is the running cost for this tool. So that would be something that I'm like, okay, you'll see most shops have that, and whether you want to have people accountable for it or you just want it to be a check-in, check-out. I know that when you start like looking at some of these single point tools or stuff that the market doesn't bear a high cost for, so we have to price them low, that I quite literally, if an operator goes to the bathroom halfway through a setup and the machine is sitting, you're losing money. It's interesting to look at those numbers that we can't look at. You might expect something to go this long, but maybe that tool that we've been running every single time an operator has an issue with it, but because we don't track cost on a tool, we don't know. And there's no, like, if an operator's not being told about it, then I can see that it's like, why would you bring it up?
Yeah.
But I've seen that. That's something I think it's crucial for expansion, to be able to track setups, to be able to track like how much is like our running cost, how much time does it take to make these tools, because we might be way off the mark. And that's something I saw through my experience of seeing some things that we did track. And then as it got tracked more, you're like, oh, we're actually like we're giving money to the customer. Like not with SET, but I've experienced that in the past of seeing those style tools that just take significantly longer. Or I know you've mentioned this before, an operator, you think it takes this long, but an operator for whatever reason is scared and cruises it at 80% spindle speed or
feed rate override.
And it's like, because it just works out better time, because then I don't have to set up another part by the end of my shift. I can actually just get off and cleanly leave. But those things, like, it makes a difference in the long run.
Yeah. Well, and we I think what we're doing right now is that we will do samplings of cost. You look at it, you'll do cost studies from time to time and look at what's happening for a certain number of jobs, but you're not doing it on every job.
Right.
Getting there would be worthwhile.
And it's a tough thing to tackle. It's way easier said than done. It's like, how do you do it without being counterproductive?
Right.
It is a large cost, and it's very, very hard to track every single cost. So sometimes you just have to estimate.
Yeah, some things have to be.
And you get it, you estimate the best you can. You get a lot of input. You do a lot of interviews with the operators to see how long are they actually spending on these things. But in the end, you do have to run on some sort of estimate. An estimate is better than a WAG.
Yeah, no. Well, another positive, something that I noticed that is very different than what I've seen out there, is that a lot of the programming is actually done by the talented operators, which to me was wild. But it's just, to me, it's brilliant and remarkable, because that's the person who's running the tool. And so they're the ones who are usually going to be asked for help first. But that actually that solves the problem that I've dealt with so much, of feedback loop of programmer to operator. Because sometimes there's not a feedback loop. That's a problem I've seen everywhere, is creating some feedback loop that doesn't become counterproductive. Of when you program a tool, it's not going to be perfect right away if it's brand new and you've never done something like it, or you have to adjust things. By having, a lot of times the lead programmers are the lead operators, that kind of solves
so
that.
the feedback loop is here to here. And
it's here to here instead of like, okay, well, I just want to get on with my day.
And yeah, whatever. Yeah.
That's something that I don't know if SUT realizes how great that is, but to come from something that wasn't that, it actually surprisingly helps us make the same tool over and over again. I've seen it in the past where that's where you start getting different people's artwork because, there's not a feedback loop. It's, hey, Jonathan programmed it, but then Brian ran the tool and he didn't like the way the program came out, so he's going to kind of tweak it this way because his wheel, wore down fast, so he changed this and changed that. But you quoted it to be this style tool, right. This, or, so that's one of those things that it's like you don't realize how actually helpful that is, because that could be an entire process improvement that's already kind of set.
I love how flat of a hierarchy we have at SCT too, where the guys in the shop are not scared to come in and talk to Jonathan or to Nick or to Sarah or Dale, who's the owner of the business. Like, it's easy. Like the regular operator can just go in and talk to the owner and go, hey, this is a problem. And the owner will sit there and listen to him. It's not like, no, I don't have time for you. I'm busy.
Yeah.
We make time because it's important. And the operators are important. Their product is important. And things can get done really quickly that way. Things can get fixed whereas some other companies, you might scrap a whole batch. But if you've got the operator who finds it early on in the batch and can bring it to you and go, we need to fix this, you can save all that scrap.
Absolutely.
Very much an open door policy.
Yeah.
And a door that you would want to be walking through too, I guess is another way to put it, is that not every manufacturing company, the person above you is going to know how to solve a problem that you may have. So, that's not always true, that the person, might be your boss, might have no idea really what you do or how to do it,
true.
or can offer you any sort of,
there.
you know what I mean? And it's just, it's manufacturing, but you might have somebody that might not have been there as long or just doesn't come from the same, cloth. So they might not be able to give you any beneficial guidance or, anything helpful versus like anything. I go to Jonathan, he can solve it. So it's like inspiration to like, I want to solve this without his help. And if I can solve it and it was hard, I'll just show it to him so he can see. But not to, there's always help. There's always someone smarter than you, which I think is it's a great environment to be in.
I find that too, because sometimes the tools that we've been able to quote on once in a while, like, we get something where I'm like, hey, Nick, I don't know how to do this. This is from your background. So
right.
now you're the one smarter on how the tool design goes, and
right.
Yeah.
It's,
I love that part of the engineering group where we all kind of have our specialty. It's not, we're not all cookie cutters of the same person. Like, you know your stuff really well, and you know your stuff really well, and you know your stuff really well, and we can all learn from each other and pass stuff off if it's someone else's specialty. And
we have a really good team, and we all work well together and respect each other. And
yeah, certainly all have very different backgrounds, but meet in the middle very well.